So, welcome, folks. We took a month off and we're back here in September. And today in our series, we're going to be exploring the window of tolerance. So, my name is Jennifer Williams, and I'm joined by my colleague, Dr. Ashley Austin. And we're going to be going over a little bit about how we can work with clients. With emotional regulation and resilience, and that the key to emotional regulation and resilience clinically really is about the window of tolerance. So, before we get started, let me share my PowerPoint with everyone. There we go. Wonderful. Wonderful. So, what we're going, before we get started to talking about the window of tolerance, and Ashley, if you want to pop in and share anything, just unmute and let me know. But we want to start off the beginning of this by just talking about, reminding everyone about the aim of our series. What we're really trying to do here in this webinar series is to advance trauma responsive practice. So what we're really doing is we really want to try and take time to unpack and explore some what we believe to be fundamental clinical concepts and skills that sometimes are overlooked in graduate school, overlooked in continuing education courses. So we want to encourage folks to have conversations and discussions about clinical practice and do it from a place that's deeply rooted in neuro-informed, trauma responsive practices. So by moving beyond specific models, right, specific modalities and interventions, what we're able to do is have these deeper discussions that apply across a lot of different evidence-based treatments. So we're focusing on sort of these like practical nuggets, like these little small powerful aspects of practice that may not always get the attention that they deserve, but they have a great potential to impact client experiences and outcomes, especially when we look at it through the lens of neurobiology. Okay. So a little bit about our trauma-informed social work education. We have, I just saw a poll pop up there. Okay. Azalea, were you able to see that?
I think she's going to put it back up in a minute, Jennifer. Maybe you want to just go through this?
You could go ahead.
Okay, all right, perfect. Thanks. So we just want to share a little bit about what our trauma-informed social work education is. Our program, our bachelor's and our master's, and especially our DSW, offers a curriculum that is grounded in trauma-informed practice. But then we also take it to a different level where we integrate within the clinical courses, not just trauma-informed practice, but trauma responsive interventions. And so just as we're bringing forward for you folks here, these little nuggets, these little powerful aspects of clinical practice, that's embedded within our curriculum from a trauma responsive neuro-informed approach. So if you're interested in learning more, especially so many of you are already practicing clinicians and you're interested in maybe taking it further and getting a doctorate, we do have a DSW. So you can scan that and find out a little bit more information. So we are the presenters, Dr. Ashley Austin and myself. I have over 26 years of clinical experience. I'm trained in EMDR, neurofeedback, heart math, clinical hypnosis, and all sorts of things. And at the university, my area is in neurobiology and the mind and body practice. I've written a few courses at the doctoral level, at the master's level on this, and bring that forward in as well as trauma-informed interventions. Ashley, do you want to say a little bit about yourself?
Sure, thanks. I'm not sure if my camera will go on. It won't, but that's okay. You all don't need
Okay,
to see me. You can look at my standard picture, which is the only image of myself that I seem to have on the internet, but that's what I looked like a few years ago. Um, anyways, welcome everybody. Glad you're here. I also am a trauma responsive therapist, EMDR certified. My specialized population is with trans and non-binary folks, but I really do this work with a whole range of clients. And as somebody who's also been in the field as long as Jen, so about 26 years, it's really exciting for us to be able to hold these conversations about what we think are some of the key components of sort of trauma responsive practice, things that didn't exist when we were doing our master's degrees or our doctoral degrees, depending on when we did those, these weren't part of the conversation. So bringing this to your attention now, some of you have been in the field forever, some of you who haven't, these concepts, so the neuro concepts and really a deep dive into trauma work has really expanded my clinical practice, and we're trying to have more of these conversations with you all, so we can all expand together. So welcome, and I'm excited to hear from Jen, as I know you are.
thanks, Ashley. Thanks. All right, so let's get started. Here's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about how the window of tolerance enhances trauma responsive practice. And we're also going to talk about some strategies that we can use not only um, in the clinical room, in the therapy room, in session, but also what we can utilize outside and what our clients can utilize outside as well. So we're going to stop here and ask a question. How familiar are you with the concept of the window of tolerance? Just take a look there. If you have a second, just go ahead and type that in. And how often do you apply the window of tolerance into your therapeutic practice? Okay. How familiar are you? I didn't learn about the window of tolerance in school, but boy, did I absolutely understand the importance of regulation with my clients. Okay, let's go ahead and close that out. Wonderful. Azalea, were we able to see the results of that? Wonderful, thank you. All right, so most of you, well, not most at all, but about a third of you are somewhat familiar, very familiar. Okay, so there's more than half have familiarity with the window of tolerance. Some need a refresher, and some of you haven't heard of it at all. How often do you apply it? Frequently, occasionally, rarely, never. What I should ask is how exactly you apply that and how you scan for seeing where they are at. Do you assess for it? Do you do a little psychoeducation? So very interesting. Okay, thank you, folks. So before we get into, before we get into what the window of tolerance is, there are a few people, leaders in the field of trauma that have informed and inspired what we're going to talk about today, mainly Dan Siegel. Right. So for those of you who are familiar with the window of tolerance, you know that he coined the term window of tolerance. He's the one that took a look at this and has dived deep into its impact on his work with what's called interpersonal neurobiology and in emotional regulation. So I'm assuming that if you've heard of window of tolerance, you've heard of Dan Siegel. He teaches, he writes about it, and he talks about how to understand this through the lens of clinical practice. You've probably also heard Pat Ogden, Bessel van der Kolk, and Deb Dana also talk about the window of tolerance. Pat Ogden is a pioneer, for those of you who are not aware, she's a pioneer in somatic experiencing. Um, she talks about this and she integrates it really well into her sensory motor psychotherapy work. Now, Bessel van der Kolk, so many of us know Bessel, right? He's known for his research on trauma and that research on the impact of the brain and the body. And he integrates the concept related to window of tolerance into his work, especially when he talks about regulation and trauma recovery. And I'm going to talk a little bit about him a little later, especially when reference his definition of trauma, how he defines trauma, not necessarily how the DSM-5 defines trauma. And then Deb Dana. Now, Deb Dana is a clinician who specializes in polyvagal theory. Stephen Porges is the person who coined the term and came up with polyvagal theory. But what she has done is she's really taken polyvagal theory and integrated it into a way that clinicians can understand. She's an LCSW, and she's made it really relatable and understandable on how do we use and understand the window of tolerance with our nervous system. So we're going to be talking about polyvagal theory, hyperarousal, and specifically some of the language that Deb Dana uses. So those are some important people. If you're interested in learning more, you're going to want to go and take a look at their work. But Dan Siegel is the one that really coined this term, right? So why do we need to focus on the window of tolerance? You know, we work with clients whose nervous systems are overwhelmed by chronic stress. Their nervous systems are overwhelmed by trauma. And if we can start to understand that there is a range that it is important for us to monitor, assess, and take a look at, because we want the range, that window of tolerance, and we'll talk about what that is. We want that to be pretty expansive. So by understanding this, it's a framework really for recognizing when clients are emotionally regulated and when they're dysregulated. And this is the kind of language that I have been finding over the past 10, 15 years or so that I have been using. It is about a client's nervous system being overwhelmed, regulated, or dysregulated. So when we assess for our client's state of regulation, which I'm going to say we should absolutely be doing in every session, and certainly doing that in our assessment, when we can assess where they are in terms of their regulation, we can better attune to their emotional state. And we can make sure then that the interventions that we're providing are much more in alignment, much more attuned with where they're showing up. We say as clinicians, we start where the clients are at. That's what we say. And so that means we have to start where they're at, find out what the pieces are that really get them dysregulated, and pop them out of their window of tolerance. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But the key to emotional regulation, the key to resilience, folks, I'm going to say, just like Dan Siegel, Pat Ogden, Bessel, and Deb Dana, the key is the window of tolerance. So here's where I want to remind folks, and I believe that we've said this in previous webinars. Let's define trauma in a slightly different way than perhaps you've seen the definition by the American Psychological Association, by the DSM. When we're talking about the psychological, the emotional, the neurological aspects of trauma, what we're talking about is something that overwhelms people in their resources. This is different. This is huge. If we can see that, and I want to say this as well, this is important, unintegrated trauma, integrated trauma, because people who've gone through trauma, traumatic events, and then integrated it into their nervous system won't be coming up with certain triggers and some of the things that we're talking about. So let's just say that when I say trauma and trauma narratives or people who have survived trauma, I'm talking about we're working with people who have unintegrated trauma. So trauma is something that overwhelms your current resources. And van der Kolk goes on to define it even further. He says trauma is something that we would avoid if we could. It's something we feel that we don't have any control over, and it's something that overwhelms our capacity to cope. When you look at trauma that way, through that definition, you can understand then that it's really important to find out what your client's current resources are, what triggers them, and what overwhelms them from a psychological, emotional, or neurological aspect. All right. So, something that we would avoid if we could, we feel we have no control over, and something that overwhelms our capacity to cope. But really, trauma is something that overwhelms your current resources. It just does. So, let's see what else I wanted to say here. While we can help uh, guide our clients through their experience, it's important for our clients to take a very active role in therapy. And that's often easier for clients to tolerate distress when they're aware, and that's why we do psychoeducation, when they're aware of whatever the route forward is, right? And it's also important to be consistent and predictable. So we're going to talk a little bit more about safety, predictability, and consistency. All right, so window of tolerance helps identify when clients are emotionally regulated versus dysregulated, ensuring that they can process this effectively. Knowing this information helps clients manage their distress without it overwhelming them. And what it does, if we can consistently do this and invite them to lean into the discomfort, utilize the tools to manage that discomfort, grow their window of tolerance, what we're doing is not only helping them with the issue at hand, but we're also giving them tools for the future and to be more resilient for future stress. And that's really what we want to do, right? When clinicians now, us, when we are not within our window of tolerance, that becomes an issue as well. We have a vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is the longest nerve in the body. It runs from the base of the skull, goes down the back of the neck, splits behind the ears, comes down the front, goes all the way down the GI system, down to the end. And that vagus nerve is activated in the parasympathetic nervous system. And it's when activated allows us to get calm and achieve a homeostasis from stress. And our nervous systems are constantly talking to one another. So it is incredibly important for us to be able to stay within our own window of tolerance so that it creates a very safe space for our clients. So it allows them to feel safe and allows them to be vulnerable, and it allows them to make meaning of just what's showing up within their body, just what's showing up in their life without having to scan and worry about what the clinician is doing. So, not only is understanding the window of tolerance an important component for psychoeducation for your client, for a path consistently of moving forward, but it's also really important for creating a safe, reliable environment for our clients. All right, so what is this? What is this window of tolerance that we're talking about? When you're coping well with the ups and downs of life, when your thoughts are rational, when your emotions are calm, that's what you're said to be functioning in, is this optimal zone, this window of tolerance. If you stay within your window of tolerance, you're able to process and successfully respond to all of the demands of life. So let's say that it's a busy Thursday afternoon. And let's say that you've been in back to back sessions all day and you're about to go into another session. And let's say that just as you're about to go in, you receive an urgent message from another client who's in crisis, and needs immediate support. And you now have to quickly shift focus. You need to manage this upcoming session and also think about how to respond to the client in crisis, all while feeling the pressure of time. Think about what that experience might be like for you folks. What might happen physiologically in your body? Maybe your heart rate increases. Maybe you start to feel the stress building. Maybe your mind is racing about thoughts on how to do you handle both of these situations. Maybe start thinking about what kind of crisis is this client in. But let's say in this example, you decide to take a few deep breaths, go within, center yourself, and genuinely trust in your ability to manage the situation. And so when you're able to do that, take some deep breaths, center yourself, and really trust that you know how best to manage this. You then start and make the decision to prioritize the immediate session in front of you, and that you will wait until that session is over to respond to that crisis. So a decision is made. Let's say that that happens. That stressor may increase your level of arousal, and it may even put you on the edge of your window of tolerance. But if you stay within that window, you can handle the stress and you can stay clear headed. So notice in that example, all this stuff is happening. Maybe you're tired. Maybe you've had a lot of sessions. You're having to shift focus and everybody's wanting a little bit of your time. And now it's a crisis and you're triaging. But notice in that example that you decide, you're not sure what to do. You decide to take some deep breaths. You decide to trust in your ability and center yourself. You make a decision and you move forward with that decision. Okay. And you decide that that is the best course of action. Let's say that you let yourself get outside of that window of tolerance. Maybe go into hyper arousal, that fight or flight. When we get in, I don't know if you folks can see that, but at the top part of that, the hyper arousal, I'll talk about that in a second, says there fight or flight activation. This is where we're not making the best judgment. This is where we might have some racing thoughts, some rigid thinking. Maybe we're feeling too much. Maybe we have an emotional reactivity or distress, hypervigilance, panic, anger, agitation. So imagine what that example would look like if you were in hyperarousal and you didn't take a moment to center and get into your optimal zone. And then there's the other end of this, hypoarousal. This is where, well, not really feeling too much. In fact, you might even have an absence of sensations. You might feel numb and withdraw or shut down. Okay. So, what we're looking for is that optimal arousal zone. During times of extreme stress, or again, unintegrated trauma, you can move outside of your window into a state of hyperarousal. And you can do that very, very quickly. And sometimes clients come in and they're not even sure what got them into there. I'll have clients say, I can run a business and I've been very successful doing bop, 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 bop. I can make decisions. I can do da, 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 da. But when it comes to my partner, it's like my kryptonite. And whenever clients say something like that, start thinking, that's very interesting. Okay. So there's something there. These might be situations around their partner, might be something that triggers a different kind of arousal that overwhelms their resources. And so that might be where we start. Okay. So that's what we want to take a look at. We know that the sympathetic nervous system is activated when we go into the fight or flight. And this is where we get irritable, folks. You get angry, you get irritable, you get anxious. Ever been late to work? I know so many of us do online things now, but go back to the day where we actually had to get in the car and drive places. Ever been really late and you know you're late and there's nothing that you're going to be able to do about it, and your heart starts racing and you're panicking? Maybe you're thinking, oh my gosh, I've been late 5 times already. Now I'm going to walk into the meeting and everyone's going to look at me and know that. So that inner chatter happens. Maybe that takes you outside, maybe into hyper arousal. And then imagine that another car pulls out in front of you. What might you do? Slam on the brakes, slam on, hit the horn. Maybe if you're really dysregulated, you say some choice words that wouldn't normally come out of your mouth, right? Get really angry. But let's say that you've had a really good morning. There's lots of time. You're not late for a meeting. You're not late for anything. And you're just sort of listening to the music or listening to something and enjoying the day, and someone pulls out. You may also just slam on the brakes, but perhaps your reaction is not so aggressive. One would say then that you're working within your optimal arousal zone. Okay. We want to make sure that we're continuing to activate the prefrontal cortex and keep that online. That prefrontal cortex is responsible for what's called our executive functions. That's what's responsible for attention and impulse control. And when that PFC goes offline, it's very difficult, very, very difficult to think clearly and rationally. All right. So, what I just really wanted to say is remember, the definition of trauma is it overwhelms your current resources. You'd avoid it if you could, and you don't feel that you have control over it. Those are the things that we want to scan the environment and look for um, when we're talking about the window of tolerance. By the way, everyone's window of tolerance is different. One person could have a wide window of tolerance when it comes to meeting deadlines and working in the evenings and working on the weekends. But that same person that could tolerate the intensity of that work really, really well and those associated emotions, they may not be able to deal with conflict. And so maybe they're very good at meeting deadlines and doing reports and managing the day-to-day tasks and people. But when it comes to a situation that shows up, conflict situation, maybe then their window of tolerance gets really thin. And then you might see then that the person's emotions are intense and difficult to manage. So we all have different windows. I just wanted to share that and remember that there's a lot of things that go into this. Our childhood experiences, right? Our social support, our current coping skills, um, and our neurobiology. All right. So polyvagal theory. For those of you who are familiar with polyvagal theory, perhaps you're seeing some themes here. So Deb Dana, as I told you before, she incorporates the concept of the window of tolerance with how she presents polyvagal theory. And what she does is she uses it to explain how the nervous system responds to stress and how the nervous system responds to trauma. Both the window of tolerance and polyvagal theory, both of these explain how our nervous system regulates arousal. And it looks at optimal functioning. So if we were to look at polyvagal theory, just to remind you folks about polyvagal theory, we have ventral vagal activation, and that is that we are active and in our window of tolerance. And when we are dysregulated, it could lead to fight or flight, which is the hyperarousal, or shutdown, which is hypoarousal. So if you're familiar with polyvagal theory, hyperarousal is what's considered sympathetic mode, and hypoarousal is dorsal. I just like looking at this because it's also nice to give a picture for our clients. That window of tolerance, that place of social engagement, that's like that zone where we just feel just right. We're not too stressed. We're not too shut down. It's like that sweet spot for handling challenges. And what polyvagal theory does is it helps us to understand how our body responds to stress and reacts to it. We feel safe and social. We get ready to fight or run away, or we shut down when things get too overwhelming. Okay. So we want to be able to guide our clients through understanding that. The other thing I want to share here is that in order for us to use and really utilize trauma-specific interventions, we need to quiet that fight or flight mind. And what's interesting is, folks, is that the fight or flight mind really wants certain things. It wants certain things in order to get quiet. And what you need to do then is you need to feed it a few things. You need to feed it a sense of safety. You need to feed it a sense of predictability. And you need to feed it a sense of repetition and consistency. At the core, core, we don't even have to go back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. At the core of every work that we do is safety. In order to build rapport with our clients, in order to allow them to very quickly open up and feel comfortable to talk about the most vulnerable things, to allow them to be vulnerable. You know, we need to be able to create an environment that helps them to feel safe. That's why we spent so much time going over therapeutic presence as well. And all of those things need to happen before we can have any intervention. This is the foundation that also allows clients to remain in their window of tolerance. And that's where our therapeutic work can be the most productive. So, if we're talking about safety, our clients need to feel physically and emotionally safe within that therapeutic setting, right? So I put on the slide there. This includes establishing trust, setting clear boundaries, maintaining a non judgmental, empathetic therapeutic presence. Now, remember, I said, what are those things that we can do to build our clients' window of tolerance in and outside of the session? This is something that we can do from the very beginning. We also want to be predictable, set clear expectations, let them know the boundaries, let them know what they'll be getting. Do you start every session following up with what you talked about before, asking how they're doing? Do you end the session talking about what you talked about and what you're asking them to do between sessions, if anything? Give them a format and also be consistent. And with most trauma focused, trauma specific interventions, you'll notice that we're teaching tools of regulation, right? That we're constantly and regularly using calming techniques such as breathing exercises, grounding practices. You see mindfulness everywhere. Because what that does is it helps people to feel safe, folks, in their own body. We need to feel safe in our body before we can expand the window of tolerance. And we've got to learn what that even means. So the good news is that we can. We can widen our window of tolerance. And if we widen our window of tolerance, we can better manage stress. The key to regulation, I'll say it again, the key to regulation is having a wide window of tolerance. But then we have a client that comes in that has unintegrated trauma. And when they come in with unintegrated trauma, they often have a certain amount of reactivity. So it can be difficult, it can be challenging to stay on the boundaries of their window of tolerance and not sort of go over them. So we have to understand that even whatever intervention you're utilizing, we're always assessing for where they are, starting where the client is at, where they are within their window of tolerance. And folks, you can see it happen. You can see it. You can see their face get flushed. You can see their eyes just sort of disconnect. You can see if they're saying my stomach's really hurting all of a sudden. Can I just get up and use the restroom, please? Or they look away, they look down, they're looking at the clock, they look at their watch, or they start to sweat, having a problem breathing. You can see this. So it's important for us to really become aware of where they are at in their dysregulation as they're talking about certain things. So there's always a chance with any um, trauma focused intervention or any intervention. There is a chance that a client will fall into that trauma response. So we need to always be scanning and looking for that. But the first step in helping our clients to widen their window of tolerance is to know how to help them get back into it. Okay. So if while they're in session and you see them pop out, we need to help them to be able to get back into it. So what's the first thing that we do? We need to become aware of the cues. We need to become aware of the signals that they are becoming hyper aroused or hypo aroused. You need to know where you are at. You need to know where you need to be. And you need to know where your clients are at and where they need to be and what they need to do to get themselves there. Yes, because our nervous systems are constantly connecting and talking to one another. Okay. So everyone's different. Everybody is different. It's common for people to report that they're becoming hyper aroused when they say that they're having a really difficult time calming down or staying calm. And if they're saying that to you, you can use that as a sign, that as a signal that they're kind of coming close to the upper edge of their window of tolerance, and you might need to intervene then. Then there's the other end. Some might say dorsal, where a client might say, I don't know that they would say it. Sometimes they'll say it. Often you just see it, that they're withdrawing, that they're shutting down, that they look down. They don't know what else to say, right? That might be a signal that they're coming close to the edge of that hypoarousal stage. So you might need to intervene. And we're going to talk about here in a second what the difference is between the two. So let's start here first. And let me ask you folks a question. Which aspect of the window of tolerance do you find most challenging when you're working with clients? And actually, if we could just put that poll up here, that might be good. Azalea, are you able to get that poll up there? Okay, it's fine. Think about this, folks. What aspect, for those of you who are familiar with window of tolerance and utilize it, what aspect do you find to be the most challenging with clients? Is it identifying the signs of hyperarousal or hypoarousal? Or you know what? Do you even find it most challenging to explain what the window of tolerance is to your clients? There we go. There we go. There we go. There we go. All right, take a second to do this. For those of you who are familiar with the window of tolerance and utilize the window of tolerance, what do you find the most challenging? Identifying the signs of hyperarousal, hypoarousal, helping clients stay within their window of tolerance, or explaining the concept to clients. So as you're doing that, let me just remind you that it's important for us to assess and sort of map out a client's current window of tolerance so that we can really better predict the intervention, right? We want to be able to make the interventions become integrated with the trauma. We want the trauma to become integrated. So we first start assessing where they are at. So you want to ask and find out, How open can a client be towards their inner experience, towards their inner life? So, some people might tell you, sometimes you might hear this from their partner, or if you're working with kids, you'll hear this from the parents. Some people might say they're always on their phones. Very easy to do. Or they might say, when you ask them, what do you do to relax? That what they do to relax is they just spend every moment watching television. If a client is immersed in another world, it's likely that they're not comfortable with their own internal experience. So that would be an indication that there's a really narrow window of tolerance. All right, let's look at where you folks really feel that you find the most challenging is really helping clients stay within their window of tolerance. Interesting. Okay. You're okay? Yeah, that's interesting. You seem to be okay identifying um hyperarousal, hypoarousal not so much, and some explaining the concepts. Okay. All right, thank you. I'll see if I can talk to that a little bit more. Um, like I said, if you have a client who, um, as you're talking, and they start to get overheated or they get thirsty or they're uncharacteristically fidgety or saying, excuse me, I need to get up and I need to use the restroom, they might be going towards hyperarousal. That's pretty easy to see, right? That's pretty easy to see. But if a client is getting sort of spacey or zoning out, you can see it if you're watching. This is why you have to have really good therapeutic presence and why there needs to be one vagus nerve in the room and why you're always scanning and watching and holding that space for the client, because then you'll start to see a shift. We used to say, in old terms, we used to say they're nonverbal communication. But you can see it. You can see when they zone out or they just become sort of non-responsive to questions. That's where we start to see a trend towards the hypoarousal. When we do psychoeducation and we teach our clients how to understand their window of tolerance and understand that it can happen in very different experiences, then we can help them to better understand and get themselves out of it. So we want to help them identify where they are most of the time. All right. If you folks have a second, if you have, well, you have a second, you're here with me. If you have a piece of paper, take out a little sheet of paper for a second. Let's do a little exercise. Um, okay. I want you to think about when you last felt calm, safe, and connected, and write that down. When did you last feel calm, safe, and connected? 2, can you recall a time when you felt anxious or on edge or overwhelmed? Write that down. 3, when did you feel distant or disconnected or shut down? Write that down. Try to give examples for each of those. Now, as you're writing the examples, I want you to tune inward into your own physical sensations, folks, okay? So write that down. Go back and remember that. Give an example and try to identify what your body felt like when you were in that moment. When you were in that moment of feeling calm, safe, connected, What'd your body feel like? When you were feeling anxious, overwhelmed, on edge, what did your body feel like? When you felt distant, disconnected, or shut down, what did it feel like? And what I would say is now that you've identified that, this is what I use with my clients. I ask them, now that we've kind of gone through that, and I would take them through where they feel that and how it's different. But remember, we also want the connection between the thought and the feeling, right? And I'll ask them now, all right, I want you now to sort of go back this past week or take this information moving forward and look for patterns. Are there situations or triggers that lead you more to overwhelm, anxious, on edge, which would be, we know as hyper arousal, right? Are there situations or triggers that lead you to feel distant or disconnected or shut down? That's that hypoarousal. And let's look and let's see what patterns there are. Like I said, I've had clients say, I'm good in every aspect of my life. I can handle everything. But when it comes to my partner, all that goes out the window. And I start to get anxious. I can't think clearly. I'm just giving you an example. So you want to take a look at those components. It's a good way to start. All right. I did have another poll, but I'm looking at the time because we started a little late. So let me make sure that I can get through these pieces here, and let me just move on. Now, there are strategies for using each one. So how do we strengthen and widen the window of tolerance? Means we've got to just be with what's there, reduce the negative, and build up the positive. So we have to assess, right? We're assessing what are those things that trigger you into hyperarousal? What are those things that trigger you into hypoarousal? And what tools do you actively use now that we can build on to allow you to get back into that optimal state, right? So, hyperarousal, remember what those behaviors are, right? Overwhelm, anxious, okay? What we want to do, strategies, they're very different from hypo, not very. There are some that are somewhat similar. There are some that are somewhat similar, but the approach is different. When we're hyperaroused, it's different than hypoaroused. So we want to work with the parasympathetic nervous system. And if you're already hyper aroused, overwhelmed, anxious, we're going to want to engage in soothing activities, those types of things that decrease our arousal, because our hyperarousal is caused by an excess of sympathetic nervous system activity. So we're already being super activated in the sympathetic nervous system, right? The buffalo's coming at us and we are ready to fight or flee. So we want to engage in parasympathetic nervous system activities. Anything that involves grounding, soothing, containment, any of that will be important. So deep, slow belly breathing. Mindful walking. Writing things down, because that can be very cathartic. Doing gentle stretching, restorative yoga, even warm water, listening to music. tried to listen to some music today before our webinar, and I heard from some folks that it sounded like it was screaming at them. That is definitely not what we wanted. We did not want to activate the hyper arousal state, right? But different music, depending on your mood, depending on your personality, different music will take you out of those states. Another thing that you can do to help clients out of hyperarousal is to have them sort of lie somewhere a little bit cozy with a weighted blanket. And of course, we know psychotherapy works for that as well. Now, let's go to the other side, hypoarousal. For this, I don't know if you guys can see that. It moved a little bit. There you go. All right. Um, this is what we can do to now increase the arousal. We want to increase the engagement, right? Hypoarousal is numb. Hypoarousal is disconnected. Think of the person that goes to their phone, goes to social media, goes to television, and just sort of escapes more often than not. I'm not saying that it's totally okay to do that. And in some instances, you want to do that if you're working with someone with anxiety, right? You want to help them to shift focus onto things. But I'm saying that their go to place is that we might be looking at hypoarousal. So, any activities that involve that stimulation of your body and your mind, anything that may ground you in the present moment is usually likely to be helpful here. Remember, everybody responds differently. So, listening to uplifting music, I used to say, tell me, make a playlist that makes you want to dance, it makes your heart smile. Listening to uplifting music, that's when you want to pull on that when you feel like you're going to the edge, you're into what we call dorsal vagal or hypoarousal. Another thing is sensory stimulation. So what's very interesting is that eating food with a strong taste or crispy texture also might help. And also doing an exercise of the five senses to ground them in that place. All right. I know I have a couple of minutes. I just have a couple more slides, but this is being recorded. So I understand, folks, we started a little late. If you need to leave, I understand. But let me go through just a couple more slides here and give you an example and some examples of that hyperarousal and hypoarousal exercise. So let's say that you have your client in hyperarousal. Then a really good exercise would be something like, let's take a minute to just ground ourselves and sort of get back into, bring our attention back into this very present moment. So just start by looking around you. And I want you to see if you can identify and observe 5 things that you can actually see. Just look around the room, take a moment to really notice each one and identify it. Right? So I'm saying, I'm looking out the windows, I'm seeing trees, other houses, I see speakers, that sort of thing. Get them to really focus on it. Might be the color of the wall, pattern on the floor, an object on the desk. Good. Now, bring your attention to what you can touch around you. And I want you to find 4 things, just 4 things that you can physically feel. This could be the texture of your clothing, the surface of the chair that you're sitting on, the ground underneath your feet, and pay attention to the sensations that each touch brings. Now we're going to shift the focus to what you can hear, and I want you to really listen closely and identify 3 different sounds that you can hear. Maybe a rustle of papers or distant voices or the hum of a computer. Listen carefully, try to pick out those sounds. I want you to notice two different scents. Maybe you have some leftover coffee from the morning. You can smell that. Maybe you're outside, windows open, you can smell the fresh air. A hint of something different. Hopefully it's positive, but it's okay if it's not. Okay. And then if there's something that they can taste, and if there's something around, you can have them drink water, take a sip of a drink, or even just remember what it tasted, their last meal tasted like. You can imagine, have them imagine something that they're eating that's delicious. This is called the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 exercise. And that helps to ground them back into the present moment, come out of that hyper aroused state and back into their space. Now, here's something that maybe you're not familiar with hypoarousal. It's called increasing your cognitive load. When you increase your cognitive load, when you give your brain a challenging task, like solving a problem or focusing on details, what it helps you to do is it helps you to wake up, and it sort of pulls you up out of feeling numb or feeling shut down. And this works because what it does is it makes your brain more active, and it brings you back to feeling more alert and connected. So literally you could just go, I want you to turn to the left. And from this left side, I want you to name three things and list three things. Don't make judgments. List three facts about those things. List three facts. I'm turning. I see a book. The book is titled Polyvagal Theory and Therapy, Deb Dana. Notice what I'm not doing. I'm not going, why didn't I put my book away? I should have put my book away. Why is it sitting out on my desk? We're not judging. We're just noticing. Okay. And then once you do that, three things, and then you turn to the right and notice three things, and name facts about those things. It's called increasing cognitive load. And finally, and folks, thanks for sticking around as we go over a few minutes. Oh, thanks, Azalea. How confident are you in your ability to help clients expand their window of tolerance? For those of you who are still here, how confident are you in your ability to help clients expand their window of tolerance? So I've placed on here the summary of what we've talked about a little bit today, and remembering that we do know that the prefrontal cortex plays a really important central role in our ability to make decisions, to think clearly, and to actually regulate our emotions effectively, right? When we're in our window of tolerance, that prefrontal cortex is active and fully engaged. It allows us to function at our best. When we move into hyperarousal or hypoarousal, that's when the PFC shuts down, and it makes it hard for us to manage our emotions. It makes it hard for us to think. And that's why, folks, trauma-focused interventions are the most effective when our clients are within their window of tolerance. And guess what? When we are within our window of tolerance as well. So I'm asking you folks to go out and find ways that you can commit to working on your own window of tolerance and bring that experience back into the work with your clients. These interventions are most effective when we are in our window of tolerance. Finding ways using our clients' resources to bring them back into hypo and hyper. But remember, even if you're not sure what to do, safe, consistent, predictable environments will help our clients to be able to stay engaged and be able to continue to work within that optimal zone. Thank you, folks, so much for being here. Confident, very confident. I love that. Please join us for the next series that we have in October, supporting clients in trauma, noticing, naming, and regulating feelings. You'll be receiving an email if you signed up and you're seeing this because you signed up for it. You'll receive an email probably about a week, a few days before, reminding you of it. Wednesday, October 23rd from 4 to 5 p.m. Thank you, folks, for being here. Really appreciate it. Have a great day.